And joining us now, former German Defense Minister Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg, who served from 2009 to 2011 under former Chancellor Angela Merkel. Thank you so much for making time for us, Minister. I want to start with the potential negotiations to end the war in Ukraine and the mixed messaging coming from the U.S. side. Vice President Vance telling the Wall Street Journal in an article published today that sending U.S. troops to Ukraine is not off the table. But listen to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and President Trump on this issue.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
Maybe Russia will give up a lot, maybe they won't, and it's all dependent on what is going to happen. The negotiation really hasn't started.
Minister, what are allies taking away from this kind of messaging?
We are all puzzled, Anna. It's a messaging that changes almost on an hourly basis. Over the last few days, we were all quite surprised by the call that the president had with Vladimir Putin, and then especially by the fact that his newly appointed Secretary of Defense is obviously taking negotiation tokens off the table. So, and all of these things without having the European allies and partners somehow included. So there is confusion is probably the mildest word I can find for that.
If the U.S. doesn't continue to support Ukraine as it has over the last few years, do you have any concerns about Europe filling the void to support Ukraine on its own?
I certainly do. We are definitely not prepared to balance the current or the existing American security umbrella for Europe. It would take years to come to a level where we could feel as secure as we need to be. And on the other hand, of course, Trump has a point, and as had already Joe Biden and others before that the Europeans need to ramp up their security measures, and we need to do more without a question. However, in that situation right now, to question core elements of NATO, of the alliance, and of our shared security is reckless. And therefore, I sat in a room before when the vice president held his speech, and I just looked into rather confused faces. And he didn't talk about Ukraine at all, as you've said before. It was more or less lecturing Europe about democracy. Quite astonishing coming out of his mouth.
Take a listen to something else we heard from President Trump related to this war and Ukraine's desire to join NATO.
I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO.
What's your reaction to those comments? Is that what allies expect to hear from the President of the United States?
Not at all, and it is beyond any historical knowledge. It's nonsense, and we all know that the war started out of very, very different reasons. And the problem we are facing right now with that phone call Trump had with Vladimir Putin is that, in our perception, it legitimizes aggression. And just consider what that means for the next years to come. So that is what should be discussed right now at the Munich Security Conference. Instead, we hear a pro-seminar about democracy.
Minister, President Trump has shown that he is willing to lean into a more aggressive, maybe unconventional foreign policy strategy, starting with the tariffs that he's threatening to every global partner. And we heard from your country's president today that the new administration has no regard for established rules and grown trust, and they must accept that and deal with it. So I wonder, how will we see Europe shift their approach to this new Trump administration?
Well, we have to accept the fact that he is president, and we need to we need to deal with a deal maker. However, I think we are in a new world right now in that regard. Europe is prepared. Europe has potential counter tariffs, but just imagine a world where we would slide into a trade war of that dimension. So this is nothing anyone would like to have, and the repercussions for the US might also be severe. So I think that's something the president has not taken into account so far. But if we are forced as Europeans to react, we will react, but that's not the world I'd like to live in.
Former German Defense Minister Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate your perspective on all this.